Your body is a slave to your voice. And your voice is what is creating everything. If you study the story of Abraham, that is where the story of the promised land actually started. When God promised land, starting with the seed of Abraham. Okay? So that's why I started with that song. What actually was promised in that land was your mind. God promised you authority over your own mind and body. That's really what the promised land is really about. Okay. So Genesis 17:7 and 17:8. I'll read it for you. It says, and I will establish my covenant. What's a covenant? A contract, right? And I will establish my contract between me and you and your seed after thee and their generations for an everlasting contract, to be a God unto you and to thy seed after you. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. I'm not going to read that again. You can look that up. That's Genesis 17:7 through 8. And that is where God told Abraham, thank you, Torah. That is where God told Abraham that he was going to enter into a contract with him that said, I'm going to give you this land of Canaan, and it's going to be for you and all your seeds that come after you. And he actually told him to, if he could look up in the sky and imagine how many stars was up in the sky, which, yes, you're really talking about the stars that's in your body. But he told him, look up in the sky. How many stars can you imagine? That's how many seeds you're going to have. And they're all going to be inherited to this land of Canaan. So that is where the initial promised land, or the contract of the promise to land, began. Now, the land of Canaan. The word Canaan has multiple meanings, but for this sermon, to make it simple, it's interchangeable with the word merchant and traffic. What I say? Merchant, trader, and traffickers. That is what the word Canaan really means. So, the word Canaan comes from the Hebrew word Cana, and that means to be humble. Oh, y'all know that word humble really irritates me, but I know what it means now. To be humble, to subdue, and to subject. The land of Canaan also means the low land. So you're already talking about something being low, right? So it would be the land of humility. Humility to who or what? Universal laws. There's really nothing else for you to be humble to. You don't have a choice but to be humble to universal laws. We could call it God. We could call it the universe. Whatever you want to call it. You're going to be humble to that shit whether you want to or not. But yes. So the land of Canaan, which is about trade and traffic and commerce, is also relative to mean the land of humility. Okay, so we're really talking about being humble to universal laws. We're talking about being humble to what I call all law. Allah, God, universe, whatever. You're talking about all law, which means that all of the laws are under this one law, which is under what God is. Now, no one is exempt to this law, and that's why everyone is humble to it. The word traffic. We're talking about the land of Canaan. Canaan means traffic. The word traffic or trade or commerce, it all means to buy and sell. To buy and sell. Right there, you know that we're talking about buying and selling what? If we're talking about, if we're really talking about the mind, then that means we're talking about buying and selling thoughts. Because that's what we do all day long. We're exchanging thoughts right now. You have a choice whether to buy the thought, which means to believe it. You know how people say, you bought that, didn't you? Yeah, because that means that you believed it. So we're selling and buying thoughts all day because we really live in here. We really live in our head. We're in our body, our heart, whatever, but we live inside of us. So the land of Canaan is a place of merchants for buying and selling and operating in commerce. The word commerce, the etymology of the word commerce means the interchange of goods and property. This is all tying into slavery because you're talking about owning property. Okay, I'm going to get further into that later, but I'm just solidifying with this land that Abraham gave to God, the land of Canaan. It's a land of commerce. It's a land of exchange of energy. Commerce also means intercourse. So actually you're talking about sex. Not the kind of sex that we think about. You always having sex. When you have an exchange of conversation, you having sex. Okay, so that land is talking about intercourse, sex, commerce, trade, exchange of energy. It's talking about managing property, the whole thing. So now let's look at the etymology of the word slave itself. Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I left a part out. There's scripture where, you know the story of Noah, when Noah's son saw him naked, and that is where God first said, cursed be Canaan. Now, I don't really know what the esoteric metaphor of that story is, but I brought that up because it's saying that Canaan, the land of Canaan, is cursed. Now, some people will say that this is talking about black people and melanated people and all that. Y'all know I don't get into the Bible. I don't take anything in the Bible literally. Everything in the Bible to me is talking about the cells within your body. So therefore, the land of Canaan was said to be cursed. And that is rolling into the whole slavery thing, really. Now, moving on. The word slave, the etymology of the word slave means a person who is cattle or property of another. Didn't I just say that Canaan is the land of commerce, and commerce means interchange of good or property. So right there, we already know that you're talking about a land of slavery. Okay? But we're going to get into how you're always a slave. You're both slave and master all the time. So the etymology says person who is cattle or property of another. It also says one who has lost the power of resistance to a habit or vice. So of course, when you're a slave to some type of habit or vice, right? The word slave is actually relative to the word robot. The word robot says, it comes from the word rabata, and it means servitude. Rabu means slave. What does Rabu sound like? Rabu sounds like rob you. Rabu sounds like rob you. Yeah, sure, it sounds like I'm making that up. But in the New Testament, slave owners are also called men stealers. Men stealers is another word for slave owners. Okay. So now that we know that a robot is also a slave. Why is that? Obviously because robots are programmable. So a slave is one that is programmed and can be programmed and reprogrammed. So when you're thinking about what a slave is, we all know that it has to be a mental thing before it becomes a physical thing. All right. Now, the word slave in the Greek language is actually interchangeable with the word body. When you get into the New Testament, the word slave, that's right, Ashley, they don't think for themselves. The word slave also means body in the New Testament. Actually, the Greek word translates from the English word slave translates from the word soma, S-O-M-A. Soma. That also means some. Like if you look up the word some, it'll tell you it also means soma. So what kind of soma is it talking about? Your body. We're still talking about your body. Your body is a slave. And it's the sum of a whole bunch of numbers. That's what it really is. Your body and the complete image of your body is a sum of vibrations, which is numbers. Okay? So when you think about what a slave is, consider it that it's your own body and it's the vibration of your own body. That's what a slave is as well. You are literally a bunch of numbers in a computer. That's why you're a robot and you're programmable. You're a computer. So if you do not make your own body a slave to you, then somebody else will make you a slave to them. It's pretty simple, right? If you do not have control over your own body, then someone else will control it for you. Someone will still rob you, rabu. Somebody will rob you of your body, literally. Once they take over your mind, they done took over your body. Now, the other thing is, when I'm saying that someone taking over your body, I'm not only talking about the physical manifestation, because that's the last step. The physical manifestation of a thing is the last step of it. In my theory, it has to go through two other steps. It has to go through the spirit, the inside of your mind. It has to go through the soul, which is the ego actually speaking, and then it shows up. 1, 2, 3. Now, I was actually told that in a dream that things have to happen in threes, 3 times. So that's how I came up with that theory. But my point of saying all that is that it is actually your false self that has taken over your body and made you a slave. Ain't no white man. It just looked like it's a white man. It just appears like that. It ain't nobody else. Your false self is doing it. If you look at the word false, it has the word self right in it. So your false self has taken over your true self. That's actually what happens. Like I keep saying, the womb is a cheat sheet. If you study all of this in regards to what's actually happening in the womb, it'll reveal it all to you. Because what's happening is when the semen takes over the egg, that's a takeover. That's the false self taking over right there. So the false self is taking over, and if you allow it, it will make you a slave of it. It will have you working for it. Meaning that the bottom is controlling the top instead of the top controlling the bottom. That's another reason why I played that song. Because he said God made you the head, not the tail. Now, we know that you're actually both. But one is controlling the other. Unless you allow one is going to control the other. Jesus said you can't have 2 masters. One is going to control the other. So what I'm saying is that yourself that is physically seen will actually rob you. Your false self, it'll rob you. If you're not in tune with your true self, which means if you're not being honest with yourself, your false self, all the shit that you're lying to yourself about will take over, and then all your lies and shit will be manifested. Then you become a slave to that shit. Okay? So, no one can enslave you but you. Let's say that one more time. No one can enslave you but you. You enslave yourself first before any so-called white man took over. Okay? So now, anyway. The word serve or servant is also used is another word that's used in the Bible to be interchangeable with the word slave. So serve, which also sounds like servant, also sounds like serpent, right? It is. Servant is also serpent. But serve means to work, to keep in bondage. It means slave. It means to do. Okay? So to bring something in bondage in the Greek language comes from the word doulo. Doulo. D-O-U-L-O-O. That sounds like dual, right? So now we're talking about you being in bondage to duality. That's actually universal law. You don't have a choice but to be in bondage to that. In order for you to exist, you have to experience both unseen and seen. So, yes, you're in bondage. You're a slave to duality. Now, everything that's happened above is below. Everything that's happened within is without. That's duality. When you allow external things to have more power than internal, you will become its slave. When you allow external things to have more power over your internal thoughts, you have become its slave, whatever it is. This is also a constant state of war that we are in. Duality, dual, which means to bring into bondage, is like a constant state of war that we have within ourselves. And the only way to bring that to peace is to realize that I am everything that I see. Because now it's not dual. I mean, you're still under that law, but you've come to the realization that it's really not dual. It's really only you. Okay, so that's very hard to do. I'm sure we realize that. But that is the common goal of peace that we're trying to get to. Today I had the realization that the word peace is also peace. P-I-E-C-E. So meaning that in order to achieve peace, we have to come to the realization, we have to stop breaking everything in pieces. That's actually what masculine energy does. Again, that's what semen does. Semen ain't nothing but the egg that's a zero, which is whole. It's another form, a scattered form of the same egg. Remember, I always say everything looks the same, it's just appearing different. So semen and menses are the same thing. So this constant war that we are in with ourselves is because we see everything in pieces instead of realizing that everything is really just a reflection of you. Okay? Now, the thing about it is that in order for us to have some type of realization, which that's what the word Israel really is. Well, my theory anyway, Israel is realized. If you move the letters around, Israel is to realize something, is to have a self-realization, a S-E-L-L-F, self-realization. That you're one with everything. You went through all of that, all the way up to the story of Jesus, for you to have a self-realization that you're the one with, that you are one with everything. You have to understand and go through the experience of being a slave of something in order for you to desire freedom. You have to experience the lie in order for you to have the desire of truth. You have to experience fear in order for you to have the desire for love. You have to experience those things. In order for you to have one, you have to experience the other. So that's why duality is the law. You have to experience it. Because God, what we call God, universe, whatever you want to call it, it's for the whole purpose of you having that self-realization. That you're one with everything. Okay? Now, servant also means, this is why I said you're also a slave and a master. The word servant also means a worshiper of God. So therefore, you being a slave, yes, you're a slave to God. You're a slave to universal laws. In Islam, they have a saying, slave of Allah. You might hear Muslims say that. They say that they're a slave of Allah. Yes, I'm a slave of Allah. I work for God. You're a slave, that means you work for God. Everybody works for God, whether they realize it or not. But when you come to the realization that you do, that's when the benefits kick in. That's when you get your inheritance. That's when you realize that you're the seed of Abraham in the Bible. And you start moving towards what Jesus represents, which is freedom and peace. Okay? So when you realize that you're working for God, the God within, the God I am. I'm always talking about the God I am. You working for the God I am is actually what gives you that freedom and that peace. Okay? So be a worshiper of God. The word worship just means to love, y'all. If you look at the etymology of worship, it means to revere, which means to love. I don't see no comments on here. Well, I see a couple of comments. All right, anyway. So, to be in bondage, which is also to be a slave, or it's to be in chains, it's to be in a prison. Everyone's in a prison. This is why you don't have a choice but to be a slave to God, but to be a slave to Allah. Everybody's always in prison. A huge part of the New Testament was about people going to prison. Starting with Jesus, getting arrested. Then Paul was getting arrested. Then Peter was getting arrested. All the stories of Paul, all those letters that Paul wrote to the churches, he was in prison. He was in prison writing letters. He really talking to you. Paul is talking to you, all the churches that's within you. Which I think the churches are like your chakras or whatever, something like that. It got to do with the cells in your body. But Paul is in prison. All of the letters that he's writing, he's in prison. What does that mean? He's in your cells. Your cells are a prison. Cells are prison. Exactly, Monica. So yes, all the letters that Paul are writing, he's talking to your cells. Because he's writing to you from the inside of your prison. Okay? Now, you have to experience being a slave. If you look at the word slave, it's moving the letter around. It's also salve. Salve, as in salvation. So that means you have to experience being a slave in order to seek salvation. The word salvation is to salve a son. Salvation, salve a son. The son is the soul. The word salve has love in it. That's why Paul said, you can have all these things, but if you don't have love, then if you don't have love, then you have nothing. That reminds me of that video I saw earlier today with that lady. She was talking to her sons. That was awesome. That was just so awesome the way she talked to them. But anyway, the word solve, S-O-L-V-E, is love. So salvation is love. Salvation is love. And solve actually means to untie. Solve as in salvation means to untie, to release, to detach, to depart, to unlock, to scatter, to dismiss. To untie it means to get out of bondage. So salvation means to get out of bondage. It means freedom. Freedom is you getting up and you doing what you want to do with your time every day. And that's worshiping God. Okay? Now, I also have here in my notes, what is the soul being released of? What is salvation? What is the soul being, what is being solved? What is being released? You're being released from being a program dummy, a robot. Like Ashley said, robots don't think for themselves. You're being released from that. I tell you, I could write a book about all the dreams I had. Actually, I probably should do that. No, I didn't have that dream. Dutch had that dream. Dutch had a dream that, no, I had that dream. It don't even matter. It was a dream that I saw my name written like on a brain. It looked like it was a brain and my name was written on it. And it said mind of her own or mind of your own or something like that. That's what tells me that having a mind of your own is what gets you in alignment with what God is. That's what releases you from being in bondage. That's what releases you from being a slave. Having a mind of your own. Most of us think that we do. Most of us think that we do have a mind of our own, when really we're just repeating what somebody else said. I mean, that's okay. But, yes, you don't want to be a program dummy robot, because that's what a slave is. Worshiping, which means to give love, time, attention, and energy. Worshiping God, the God within, the God I am, is how we conquer being slaves. So you need to work for God, which is yourself. Working for God is working for yourself, and that's how you conquer being a slave. Even though you're still going to be a slave, because you're going to be a slave for God. Either way, you're going to still be a slave. But if you be a slave for God, then now you have benefits. Okay? You get the benefits from God versus the benefits from man. Now, the words servant and serve are also, which means slave, are also interchangeable with the word minister and deacon. Ministers and deacons are servants of God. As we should all know, this is why churches do not pay taxes, because they work for God. Neither do nonprofits. Nonprofits, they are tax exempt. Why? Because they work for God. See, when you claim that you work for God, yourself, the God I am, and you're doing it for the benefit of the all, then though you're working for God, the world is benefiting from it. That's why you're nonprofit. You're also nonprofit because you're literally saying, I'm going to rely on God. Everything that I get is going to come from the people, but the people are just a resource of what me relying on God. It's like you're going in order for it to come out. It's a circle. You're going in order for it to come out and roll and come back to you. So a minister and a deacon, they are servants of God. And they work for God in turn to serve the people for God. So let's look at the word minister. The word minister means to perform religious rites, to provide religious services, and to serve food and drink. Food and drink is to nurture. It's to nurture people. You nurturing people that helps them grow spiritually. So the job of a minister is to help people grow spiritually. Okay, that's giving them food and drink. That's feeding them. That's also why they asked Jesus, ain't you hungry? Do you want to eat? He said, I have food that you know not of. I'm not eating your food. My food comes from within. I'm being spiritually fed. Now, minister also has the word star on it. It's literally saying mini star, a small star. Okay? The word star actually means influence of planets and zodiac on human affairs. This is how we know that the zodiac really is right, true, and correct. The energy that comes out of us really is the zodiac. It's the stars within us. Non-profit. I thought about that, Monica. I'm still not sure what that means, but I know it got to do with money, and money got to do with energy. So anyway, I'm still thinking about that. But a mini star is a small star, which means it hasn't. Don't we call stars literal stars? Beyonce, Jay-Z, all these rappers and stuff. They have influence, right? That's why we call them stars, because they have influence. So we're all doing that to each other because we all influence each other in some form or fashion. That's how I know that we're all really stars. We're all ministers. We're all mini stars. Again, we all work for God. We're all a slave of Allah. Everyone is a slave of Allah. Now, you are the master over your slaves within your body. So now I'm going to get into why you are the master. You're the master and you're the slave. I've been studying this all day, and I could have went so many different ways with this. But you are a master of the slaves because the slaves are the cells in your body. You are the master of the slaves. You are the master of the selves. You are the master of the selves. Same thing. The cells in your body is what keeps the flesh going, correct? So you're the master of that. Now, in the Bible, right at the beginning of the Bible, the Bible is telling us that the slaves in our body, the cells in our body, are under the commands of the voice of God. How do we know that? Listen to what I said. The slaves in your body are the cells in your body, and they are under the voice and command of God. It's telling us that right at the beginning of the Bible. Watch this. The word Genesis is genes of Isis, right? So you already know you're talking about genes. That means you're talking about cells right off the bat. This is how I don't understand, sidebar, how people, never mind. Because it's like right in your face, like right here. It's right here. So it's like, how do you not get that the very first book is called Genesis and it's called genes? So that tells you right there, you're talking about cells within your body. So anyway, right at the beginning of the Bible, when God starts to speak, before God speaks, It starts in Genesis 1 and it says, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the earth and the face of darkness. I'm sorry. And whatever it says, over the face of whatever. But I know it says over the face of the waters. Right? Yeah, it says the Spirit of God, which the word spirit is breath. That's your breath. Was hovering over the waters. And then God spoke. So God speaking over waters is what is causing vibration to impress upon the waters. And that is what is creating, that is what is molding that egg. When the semen comes in there and is make that whole vibration and is just putting some kind of impression on the egg and is molding it. It's really words that's doing it, because we know that vibration is words, right? So when in the beginning of the Bible, when God speaks and he says, let there be light. Well, every time you open your mouth to speak, you are speaking directly over your cells and you are telling them what you think, and your heart is telling them what you feel, and you're putting an impression on all the water in your body, which is where your cells live. So in the beginning, when God said, let there be light, every time you open your mouth to speak, light comes out. You just can't see it. Light comes out. Why is light coming out? Because the words came from your heart and your mind. You have neurons going off up here, right? Neurons are fire. You also have fire in your heart. You have passion. So every time you speak, it's coming from there. It's coming from there. Light came out. Let there be light. Okay? This is also happening in the womb, of course, like I said, when semen comes in there and is speaking over the waters. So, we are, what time is it? Okay. We are to be obedient. No, our cells in our body are to be obedient to us. And we are to offer our whole body as a living sacrifice to God. That's what the Bible says. Romans 6:16. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one who you obey? Whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. It's telling you that you're a slave either way. You're a slave either way. Either you're going to be a slave to obedience to the laws and go search to the God within, or you're going to be a slave to other people, external. Either way, you're going to be a slave, one or the other. Okay? Romans 6:17, but thanks be to God, though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. So what that is saying is that once you come to the realization that you are to follow your heart, the God within, and you become obedient to that, you become obedient to that voice inside of you, that you are going to be taught lessons. Because what did it say? Yes. You have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. So it means that you're going to obey the lessons that you're getting. Your heart, the reason why it's talking about your heart is because your heart is what's manifesting everything and what's making shit be lured to you. So everything that is lured to you is a lesson for you. It's your heart is your teacher. Your heart is your teacher. It's luring things to you that you need to learn. Okay? So, when you know that you work for God, it is impossible to be enslaved by another. Romans 12:1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. This is where it goes into present your bodies to God as a holy sacrifice. Yes, you work for God. That's why you present your body to God as a holy sacrifice, a living sacrifice. Your whole body is a slave, really, for your own voice. Let me take a drink on that. Your body is a slave to your voice. And your voice is what is creating everything. We already know that. So, I don't know what scripture this is, but it has, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your body. Oh, I did the NIV version and the King James version. Because the King James version, in that scripture where it says, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, at the end of the NIV version, it says, this is your true and proper worship. This is your true and proper worship. So that means your true and proper way to worship the God I am, the God within, is to present your whole body as a living sacrifice to God. You are going to give you're going to give your body to the world. When you give your body to God, you give your body to the world. And you become a benefit to everybody around you and everybody that you influence and everybody that you encourage. Okay? That is actually the end of my sermon.